Welcome to National Eyes. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Picture this: container ships sitting idle in the vast port of Shanghai, their hulls heavy with goods that may never reach their destinations. In Germany, auto workers gather in break rooms, their faces etched with worry as they scan headlines about layoffs and shrinking order books. The world's supply chains, once humming with precision, now sputter with uncertainty. Meanwhile, across the heartland of America, Iowa farmers huddle over kitchen tables, staring at spreadsheets awash in red ink. They're not just numbers, they're the difference between keeping the family farm or losing it to the bank. The ripple effects of global trade disputes have reached deep into rural America, threatening livelihoods that have endured for generations. The scene shifts to the imposing marble steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, where a historic decision is about to be made, one that binds together the fates of workers, farmers, and business owners across continents. This isn't a political thriller or a work of fiction. It's October 13, 2025. The justices are preparing to hear arguments in a case that could unravel President Trump's sweeping tariffs, policies that have upended global markets and ignited fierce debate in every corner of the world. But this case is about far more than taxes or trade. At its core, it's a test of presidential power. How much authority does one person have to reshape the rules of the global economy? The stakes are nothing less than the stability of the American economy and the future of international commerce. The outcome will ripple through every aisle of American stores, every factory floor, and every international port. Prices for everyday goods, the security of millions of jobs, and the very rules that govern how nations trade with one another all hang in the balance. The central question is as old as the republic itself. Did the president overstep his constitutional authority, or does the executive branch truly have the power to unilaterally reshape the nation's economic destiny? The answer will set a precedent for generations to come. Around the globe, the world is watching. Newsrooms from New York to London to Beijing are abuzz, and the arguments unfolding in Washington will have real, tangible consequences for millions. From Detroit factory workers, whose jobs depend on exports, to tech entrepreneurs in Shenzhen, China, who are racing to adapt to a new era of uncertainty and shifting alliances. This is more than a legal battle. It's a story about the balance of power in our democracy and whether the nation's institutions can withstand a presidency determined to test and perhaps redefine the very limits of American authority. To truly understand today's crisis, we need to hit rewind and look back at the chain of events that brought us to this pivotal moment in history. The roots of the current trade war stretch back years, shaped by mounting tensions over jobs, manufacturing, and global competition. It's a story of shifting alliances, economic anxieties, and political promises. When President Trump took office, he branded himself as the tariff man, vowing to use tariffs as his signature tool to defend American industries and force foreign governments to the negotiating table. His approach was bold, controversial, and unlike anything seen in decades. In 2024, his administration launched a sweeping wave of tariffs on imports from China, Europe, Mexico, and Canada. By declaring national emergencies, the White House sidestepped Congress, sparking fierce debate about the limits of presidential power. The legal justification? A sweeping interpretation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. Originally designed for targeted sanctions against hostile nations, IEEPA was now being used to justify broad global tariffs, an unprecedented move that raised eyebrows across the legal and business worlds. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Businesses across the country saw costs skyrocket overnight, forcing tough decisions about layoffs and closures. Meanwhile, American farmers, already struggling, were hit with harsh retaliation from trading partners, leaving fields empty and futures uncertain. The nation quickly split. Critics decried the move as a dangerous case of executive overreach, warning of long-term damage to the economy and the rule of law. Supporters, however, rallied behind the president, insisting these tough measures were necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition. As the economic pain deepened and legal questions mounted, a powerful coalition of businesses, trade groups, and legal experts banded together to challenge the president's authority in federal court, arguing that the use of IEEPA in this way was never what Congress intended. Now, with the stakes higher than ever, the Supreme Court faces a historic decision. Will it uphold this bold expansion of executive power, or will it draw a line and reshape the balance between Congress and the president for years to come? The legal fight over Trump's tariffs is a constitutional clash that has sparked intense debate and legal scrutiny. It centers on who ultimately controls America's economic fate, Congress or the president. Businesses and legal experts argue that the Constitution clearly grants Congress the power to set tariffs, not the president. They claim that using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose broad tariffs is an overreach of executive authority. In 2024, a federal appeals court sided with this view, invoking the Major Questions Doctrine. This doctrine asserts that only Congress can authorize such sweeping actions that have significant economic and political implications. However, the Trump administration argues that the language of IEEPA is intentionally broad, designed to give the president flexibility in times of national emergencies. They contend that in a fast-moving and unpredictable world, the executive branch needs the agility to act swiftly to protect national interests and respond to crises. The Supreme Court, which currently has a conservative majority, has recently taken steps to rein in executive power. However, cases involving national security often receive more deference from the justices. The outcome of this case remains uncertain, making it one of the most consequential executive power cases in recent decades. The decision could redefine the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches. The court's ruling will set a precedent for how far presidents can go in the name of emergency, potentially reshaping the scope of executive authority for years to come. The stakes are incredibly high, touching on the very structure of American government and the separation of powers that defines it. The struggle over tariff power is as old as the Republic. For much of U.S. history, Congress set tariffs, often through messy partisan debates. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930, blamed for deepening the Great Depression, led Congress to delegate some trade authority to the president. Laws like the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act allowed presidents to negotiate, but always within limits set by Congress. In recent decades, presidents have stretched these powers, citing national security to act unilaterally. Trump's sweeping tariffs mark a dramatic escalation, shifting trade policy's center of gravity to the White House. Now, the Supreme Court must decide if this shift has gone too far, or if it's the new normal. The stage is set for a Supreme Court showdown that could redefine presidential power. At issue, does IEEPA let the president impose tariffs during a national emergency? Business challengers say no. Congress never meant IEEPA for broad economic protectionism. They argue the law was for targeted sanctions, not rewriting trade policy. The administration counters that regulate importation is broad enough to include tariffs, especially for national security. The court's ruling will signal its approach to executive power in other major cases this term. With public trust in the court at stake, the justices face pressure to deliver a clear, principled decision. The outcome will echo far beyond trade, shaping the limits of presidential authority for years to come. Imagine global shipping lanes. If the court strikes down tariffs, trade routes could normalize, lowering prices and restoring supply chains. If tariffs stand, trade flows remain fractured, with new retaliatory tariffs and a world split into economic blocs. U.S. businesses face higher costs and uncertainty, some moving operations overseas, ironically undermining the goal of protecting American jobs. Politically, striking down tariffs would reassert Congress's role and check presidential power. It could inspire lawmakers to reclaim authority and limit future executive overreach. Upholding tariffs would set a precedent for presidents to bypass Congress on major issues, concentrating power in the executive. Supporters call it necessary for a complex world. Critics warn it's a step toward authoritarianism. The decision will reshape the balance of power in Washington and the world. The Supreme Court's decision will ripple through every corner of American life. Striking down tariffs could lower costs for businesses and consumers, but challenge industries that benefited from protection. Politically, it would be a blow to Trump's agenda and a win for congressional authority. It could spark new laws clarifying and limiting emergency powers. Upholding tariffs would validate sweeping executive action, setting a powerful precedent for future presidents. Legally, the case will define how courts interpret emergency powers and the Major Questions Doctrine. For workers and global partners, the stakes are high. Jobs, alliances, and economic stability hang in the balance. The ruling will help determine whether America leads a rules-based order or turns inward. Legal scholars say the court's skepticism of executive overreach may be decisive. Professor Maya Sen notes the justices must justify any expansion of presidential power with clear reasoning. Professor Jennifer New warns the court's even-handedness is on trial. Will it apply the same standards to Trump as it did to Biden? Former Solicitor General Donald Verrilli predicts the court will want to uphold checks and balances, but may hesitate to overturn presidential actions in foreign policy. The Cato Institute argues IEPA's text and history don't support unilateral tariff power. Many experts expect the court to rule against the president, returning tariff authority to Congress. The decision will test the boundaries of executive power and the integrity of the court itself. This case is more than a trade dispute. It's a test of American democracy. The Supreme Court's ruling will define the balance of power between President and Congress, and America's role in the world. If tariffs are struck down, Congress must reclaim its responsibility over trade policy. If upheld, the presidency gains a powerful tool to bypass lawmakers. The principles at stake, rule of law, separation of powers, economic stability, are the foundation of our republic. Every citizen should understand what's at stake and hold leaders accountable. The decisions made in the Supreme Court will shape our economy, our freedoms, and our future. The future of American power, at home and abroad, hangs in the balance.